There is a truth that is very hard to believe. In this world, there are places where the longer you live, the less money you spend. Not because you live more poorly, not because you suddenly become good at saving, but because in those places, life does not constantly force you to buy more things just to feel like you are doing okay. If this sounds illogical, it may be because we have grown used to spending money to keep up with the pace of life, not to actually live. And if you always feel that money runs out faster than your energy, perhaps the problem was never you, but the place you are living. 5. Nepal, where a full day of living can cost less than an office lunch in New York. It sounds like a false statement, not because it is strange, but because it directly challenges the logic we believe to be true. $5 a day, food, transportation, living in real life, sounds made up. But if that impossible thing keeps happening consistently, then perhaps what needs to be questioned is not Nepal, but the way we have grown used to living. Mark, an American in his 40s, formerly a construction project manager in California, came to Nepal not to find a cheap place. He came because he was exhausted from years of six-figure income but a constant feeling of lack of time, lack of sleep, lack of a moment where he did not have to prove that he was okay. At first, Mark planned to stay in Nepal for 2 weeks. 2 weeks to walk and let his mind settle. 2 weeks with no email, no calls, no meeting schedules. He called it a reset, nothing more. But then something strange happened. The money in his wallet did not disappear at the familiar pace he had known for more than 20 years living in the United States. On the first day, Mark had breakfast at a small place with no sign. A plate of hot lentil rice, the smell of unfamiliar but comforting spices. The owner did not speak English, just smiled and placed an extra cup of tea in front of him. Lunch was a few steamed buns bought on the street. In the evening, he walked back to his guest house, stopping to buy a cup of hot tea. Total spending for the day, not even reaching $5, no deprivation, no hunger, no hardship. What confused Mark was not that it was cheap. It was that everything unfolded as if Nepal did not operate under the financial rules he was used to. And then another doubt surfaced, small but sharp. If this place really was that affordable, why were people still able to stay long-term? Mark did not have to wonder for long, because as soon as he arrived, he learned one strange thing. Nepal allows many visitors to obtain a visa on arrival, with durations of 15, 30, or 90 days, and it can be extended to a total of 150 days. Long enough for someone who just stopped by for 2 weeks to start forgetting the return date. By the third day, Mark realized he had not opened his banking app even once. Not because he had suddenly become richer, but because he no longer had a reason to check. Money was no longer something draining him hour by hour. It simply sat there, sufficient. Then on the fourth night, a very American kind of fear returned, instinctively. What if something happens? Nepal did not answer with words. It answered with its rough reality. Healthcare here is not strong, especially outside the capital. In Kathmandu, there are decent private hospitals with consultation costs of only a few $dozen. But when illness becomes serious, many foreigners are still mentally prepared to fly to Bangkok or Delhi. That feeling both makes you cautious and makes one thing very clear. This is a place where you can live cheaply, but not carelessly. And then comes the question of safety. The thing Americans always ask before putting money down. Nepal has something hard to believe. Violent crime against travelers is low. Robberies and assaults are rare. Risks usually lie in pickpocketing and petty theft in crowded areas, such as Tamil or bus stations. But Nepal also carries another kind of fear, quieter, deeper. Earthquakes are a major risk, and during the monsoon season, there can be flash floods and landslides in mountainous regions. You don't see it every day, and that is exactly why it is formidable. One afternoon, Mark stood watching the sun set behind a distant mountain range, and a question appeared. Not dramatic, not loud, but strong enough to stop him in place. If I can live like this, absurdly cheap, reasonably safe, and easy to stay, then what was I running for before? Nepal did not give him an answer. It simply placed him into a different reality and let the doubt grow on its own. 4. Bolivia, where money is so cheap that you begin to ask yourself, have I been valuing it too much? Bolivia has a trait that is deeply uncomfortable for modern thinking. Here, a low cost of living does not bring a sense of victory. It does not make you feel smarter, better at calculating, or more free living than anyone else. On the contrary, it creates a strange emptiness, where money suddenly has very little to do. And when money is no longer busy, people begin to feel unsettled. A day of living in Bolivia can pass on about $5, not because everything is subsidized or because you have to go hungry, but because there are not many options that push you to spend more. You eat what is available, travel the same way everyone else does, and end the day without feeling like you have just sacrificed the experience. In many other places, money is used to buy speed, convenience, and distance between you and the rest of society. In Bolivia, money is only used to buy what is necessary, and then its role ends. There is no premium version to upgrade to, no better service package to make you hesitate, and no sense that spending a little more will noticeably change your life. At first, this feels almost absurd because it runs directly against the entire consumer logic most of us have grown used to. Bolivia's cheapness, therefore, is not the kind advertised. It is the kind that makes you realize your previous standard of living may have been pushed unnecessarily high, without anyone ever asking whether you truly needed it. When everything stays at a basic level, comparison loses its meaning. And when comparison disappears, money naturally starts to be spent more slowly. What makes Bolivia even more distinct lies in how the country views foreigners. Here, there is a very straightforward number: $600 per month. That is the income level accepted for retirement residency. No investment required, no property purchase required, no need to prove that you will generate significant economic value. This number is not an invitation, but more like a nod. If you can take care of yourself at that minimum level, you can stay. Bolivia does not treat foreigners as special customers, nor does it see them as a source of revenue. You are not favored, but you are also not obstructed. You simply exist alongside the system that is already operating. This approach makes many people uncomfortable, especially those who are used to being catered to, used to everything having an expat version. Bolivia does not do that. It does not design life around people coming from the outside. And precisely because of that, low costs are not quietly inflated. There is no such thing as an obvious foreigner price, because very little is adjusted specifically for them in the first place. Healthcare in Bolivia reflects this philosophy very clearly as well. A standard private consultation costs around $30, cheap enough not to create pressure, but also enough to remind you that this is basic care. Bolivia does not sell the illusion of absolute safety. It does not hide its limitations, nor does it try to reassure you with vague promises. You are cared for when needed, but you are also reminded that living cheaply does not mean living carelessly. This is the point many people misjudge about Bolivia. They assume that cheap means easy, when in reality, cheap here comes with higher personal responsibility. And it is precisely this combination, low cost, low expectations, and low cushioning, that creates a very distinctive feeling. Bolivia does not excite you. It makes you think. Think about how much of your past spending was truly necessary, and how much of it was simply meant to compensate for pressure, for speed, for the feeling that you always had to move just a little faster. Bolivia is not a place to enjoy life in the conventional sense. It is not designed to make you forget reality. On the contrary, it places you into a slow rhythm, with few choices and little stimulation, and forces you to face a very uncomfortable question. If living like this is still okay, then what problems was I spending money to solve before? Bolivia does not answer that question. It does not philosophize, explain, or persuade. It simply exists, with persistently low costs and a kind of indifference. And it is precisely that indifference that makes many people leave quickly, while others stay far longer than they ever expected. 3. Cambodia, where low cost is not a marketing claim, but something you verify yourself after just a few days. There is a truth that makes many Americans skeptical from the start. In Cambodia, a foreigner can live normally on about $6 per day for food and transportation, if they live like locals. Not living in hardship, just not living by Western spending standards. That number is not a promise. It is simply the sum of very specific expenses. Robert, a 54-year-old American man who previously worked in logistics in Arizona, came to Cambodia after leaving his job. He was not looking for a cheap paradise. He just wanted to know what it felt like to live in a place where money was no longer something to consider in every small decision. At first, he planned to stay in Phnom Penh for 1 month. In the very first week, Robert kept careful notes. Breakfast at a local spot, a simple lunch, a light dinner, getting around by tuk-tuk or bus. No meal was especially cheap, but no day exceeded what felt familiar. His total basic daily living expenses hovered around $6 per day, stable enough that he did not need to adjust his behavior. What caught Robert's attention was not that the amount of money was lower, but the consistency. There were no confusing extra expenses, no feeling that money just evaporated, as he had been used to in the United States. After a few days, he stopped tracking, not out of carelessness, but because there was nothing left that required close monitoring. Cambodia does not overwhelm you. It simply makes costs predictable. The next factor Robert cared about was the ability to stay. Cambodia has a relatively flexible visa system for foreigners. One common extension allows a 12-month stay, and it can be renewed again without leaving the country. There is no pressure to decide early, no need to constantly watch the calendar and count days. For Robert, this was the biggest difference, not because he wanted to stay forever, but because he was not forced to leave simply due to paperwork. Life could unfold at its own pace, rather than according to a visa deadline. Regarding healthcare, Robert approached Cambodia with realistic expectations. When needed, he visited private clinics in Phnom Penh. A standard consultation costs around $20. Common issues are handled quickly, and medications are easy to obtain. But he also clearly understood the limits. For serious illness or complex procedures, many foreigners prepare to seek treatment in another country in the region. Cambodia does not hide this. People who live here long-term all know it and prepare accordingly. There is no feeling of being misled. Regarding safety, Robert's experience was fairly consistent. He did not feel threatened, But he was not careless either. Avoiding late-night walks, not carrying unnecessary valuables, using appropriate transportation, daily life unfolded normally. There was no lingering sense of tension, but also no illusion that everything was absolutely safe. One afternoon, Robert noticed a small but telling thing. He could no longer remember what day of the week it was, not because he was disoriented, but because nothing in his day depended on the calendar. No urgent bills, no mandatory appointments. Life unfolded within a wide enough margin that he did not have to react constantly. After 1 month, Robert did not decide to settle down. He simply extended his stay. Not because Cambodia was extremely cheap, but because here, low costs came together with the ability to stay longer, in a calm and controlled way. Cambodia is not for everyone, but for those looking for a place with low and stable living costs, a visa system that does not create time pressure, and a life that is safe enough if you stay aware, this is a practical option, with no need for embellishment. 2. Ethiopia is a low-cost experience that is inherently challenging, where cuisine, history, and an ancient rhythm of life are not softened to please outsiders. Ethiopia is one of the very few places in the world where the first feeling is not cheap, but out of sync. Out of sync with familiar rhythms of life, out of sync with packaged tourism, and out of sync with the idea that a low-cost country must try to please outsiders. Ethiopia does not do that, and precisely because of this, it becomes different. What the audience needs to know from the start: Ethiopia is not a place to enjoy. It is a place to confront. Low living costs are only the outer layer. What lies beneath is a civilization operating on its own logic, not optimized for convenience, not softened for easy consumption. You do not come to Ethiopia to be served. You come to adapt. This difference shows most clearly through food. In Ethiopia, you do not order individual dishes. You eat from a shared platter with injera, a spongy flatbread made from teff grain, slightly sour, serving both as food and as the plate. Stews such as doro wat, spicy chicken stew, or shiro, ground chickpeas, are placed directly on the injera, and everyone tears bread and eats together. No knives or forks, no portioning, no concept of an individual serving. This is not an interesting detail to mention, but a way of life, communal, slow, and non-individualized. For many viewers, this meal alone is enough to cause cultural shock. Ethiopia is also one of the rare African countries that was never fully colonized. This is not something confined to dry history books, but something present in everyday life. Its own Amharic script, the Ethiopian calendar with 13 months in a year, and the sense that time here moves on a different rhythm. Not slow because of backwardness, but slow because it was never forced to synchronize with the rest of the world. This unsettles many people, even makes them uncomfortable. But it is also exactly why Ethiopia does not resemble any other country on the list of low-cost destinations. In terms of experience, Ethiopia does not offer places that are beautiful for social media, but places that make you fall silent. The rock-hewn churches of Lalibela are carved straight down into solid rock, not built upward but excavated downward. The ancient city of Gondar or the Lake Tana region, the source of the Blue Nile, all evoke the same feeling. You are not sightseeing, but standing inside a layer of living history. Ethiopia does not tell its story. It lets you feel it. However, Ethiopia is not a place to enter unprepared. This is the part of information the audience needs most. Healthcare in Ethiopia is sufficient for common issues, but not for carelessness. Private clinics in Addis Ababa can handle minor illnesses, But for complex cases, foreigners often need to consider treatment in another country in the region. Ethiopia does not hide this, nor does it offer false reassurance. Living cheaply here means taking greater personal responsibility for yourself. In terms of safety, Ethiopia is generally fine if you stay away from sensitive areas and do not get involved in political matters. Violent crime against foreigners is not common, but pickpocketing and petty theft can occur in crowded places. More importantly, Ethiopia is not the kind of safety that allows you to relax completely. It is a form of safety that requires constant awareness. If you are used to a sense of passive protection, Ethiopia will not give you that feeling. So what does Ethiopia offer that other low-cost countries do not? It offers depth. Here, low cost is not used to hide inconveniences, but to expose them. You do not pay money to buy comfort. You accept discomfort in exchange for an authentic experience. For some people, this is too much. For others, it is the only reason to come. Ethiopia is not for those seeking relaxation, nor for those wanting an easy life. It is for those curious about a world that has not been standardized, where meals are rituals, time is a flexible concept, and history does not sit behind display glass. If you are looking for a cheap place to stay long-term and live comfortably, Ethiopia is not the first choice. But if you want to understand what it means to live within a civilization that has not been flattened, Ethiopia is a rare answer, and not easily forgotten. 1. Nicaragua is a rare point of balance where low living costs still come with a sense of security, especially in healthcare and daily life. Nicaragua differs from most low-cost countries in one very important way. It does not force you to constantly remind yourself that, because it's cheap, you have to endure it. Here, low cost does not come with a persistent feeling of instability. Life moves steadily, slow enough for you to breathe, but not so slow that it becomes suffocating. Food in Nicaragua is simple in a positive sense. Gallo pinto, rice mixed with beans, chicken, plantains, local cheese, tortillas. These familiar dishes repeat day after day, not because of a lack of choice, but because they are filling, sustainable, and do not create spending pressure. When meals are not constantly being upgraded, money naturally gets spent less without any effort. What makes Nicaragua stand out most among low-cost countries is healthcare. This is one of the rare places where the healthcare system does not become a constant source of worry. Public hospitals are free for citizens and residents, while the private system in the capital is good enough for most common needs. You do not have to live in a constant state of, what if something happens? And that alone creates a major difference compared to places that are cheap but force you to trade away peace of mind. The pace of life in Nicaragua is slower than the North American standard, but not the kind of slowness that becomes irritating. Things move with less urgency, less performance pressure, less mental noise. No one pushes you to do more, spend more, or live according to some proper standard. This gentleness does not impress immediately, but it is what causes many people to stay longer than they planned. In terms of experience, Nicaragua does not lack destinations, but it also does not force you to check them all off. Colonial cities like Granada or Leon are beautiful in a straightforward way, without embellishment. Volcanoes, lakes, and beaches are all present naturally, without excessive commercialization. Nicaragua does not try to overwhelm, and because of that, it is easy to live in. Safety is generally fine if you follow basic principles. Avoid empty areas at night. Do not display valuables. Respect local laws. More importantly, a constant sense of vigilance does not take over your mind. You live rather than remain in a defensive state. Nicaragua is not the cheapest place, nor is it the most impressive, but it is one of the very few places where low living costs come together with the ability to live long-term without sacrificing mental well-being. In the world of low-cost living destinations, sometimes it is precisely this stability, steadiness, and low level of worry that is the most valuable thing. If you had to choose one place to reduce the pressure of life, which would you choose? Or would you choose to change your pace of life right where you are now? You may not need to move anywhere at all. But perhaps after watching this far, it will be hard to return to living the same way without asking yourself one question. If somewhere, people can live more slowly, spend less, and not have to constantly buy something just to feel okay, then is the problem really income? Or is it the pace of life we have accepted for far too long? The countries you have just seen are not perfect, but they show a possibility that few people say out loud. Life does not have to be expensive to be called living. And the final question is not, do you dare to move, but rather, how long will you continue to pay with money, time, and energy for your current way of life?